Hello and welcome back to the history of the Mongols. I'm your host Kyle. It is easy to overlook the name Guyuk Khan in the long shadow cast by his grandfather Genghis Khan, his father Ögedei, or his more renowned cousins Mongke and Kublai. Few medieval chroniclers had much positive to say about him, and his successor Mongke Khan made sure that Guyuk's reputation remained tarnished. Yet the reign of Guyuk Khan marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Mongol Empire, the critical transition of power from the line of Ögedei to the descendants of Toluid. When Guyuk ascended to the position of Great Khan in the summer of 1246, he was around 40 years old. As the eldest son of Ögedei Khan and his wife Töregene, little is recorded of his early life beyond his noble birth. He appears to have held minimal administrative experience prior to his elevation, with his most notable involvement being in the famous Western campaign that brought the Mongol horde into Europe. There he performed competently, though tensions emerged between him and the campaign's senior leader, Batu, son of Jochi. Guyuk and his cousin Mongke withdrew their forces before the campaign reached Hungary, and they had not returned to Mongolia by the time of Ögedei's death in December 1241. Following her husband's death, Töregene launched a carefully calculated political campaign to secure the throne for her son. Though Ögedei had, at different times, and under varying states of sobriety, expressed intentions to name several sons and even a grandson as his successor, there is no clear indication he had firmly settled on Guyuk. In the Mongol Empire, where primogeniture was not practiced, Guyuk's status as the eldest son guaranteed nothing. Intriguingly, the historical sources suggest that Guyuk himself took a passive role in this power struggle, with his mother Töregene bearing the brunt of the effort, political, financial and personal, required to see her son elevated. Her ambition came at considerable cost, including a bitter fallout with another son, Khotan, and a grandson, Shiramin, both of whom also harboured claims to the throne. As for Guyuk's character, historical depictions are shaped as much by politics as by fact. Raised under the guidance of the Atabeg Kadak, a Turkic tradition where young men were trained in the arts of war, Guyuk likely developed an affinity for Christianity, as Kadak himself was a Christian, though Guyuk never formally converted. Later accounts, especially those influenced by his political rivals and successors, portray him as plagued by illness, prone to excessive drinking, and uninterested in governing, much like his father, Ögedei, in his later years. Yet external sources, less entangled in the internal Mongol rivalries, paint a more complex picture. A particularly valuable source comes from John of Plano Carpini, a Franciscan friar and envoy of the Pope, who attended Guyuk's coronation in 1246. His description of Guyuk diverges from the dismissive portrayals crafted by later Genghisid factions. Instead, he depicts Guyuk as a stern, disciplined figure, serious about ruling, focused on restoring central authority, and determined to expand and stabilize the empire after the chaotic regency of his mother. It is probable that Guyuk, like many of his contemporaries, struggled with alcoholism and chronic health issues, but neither trait was uncommon among the Mongol aristocracy. More importantly, the challenges of his reign were rooted not solely in his personal shortcomings, but in the difficult task he inherited, reining in powerful princes who had grown accustomed to limited imperial oversight during his mother's regency, and reasserting the authority of the Great Khan. With this context in mind, let us explore the reign of Guyuk Khan and assess what he accomplished and where he faltered during his brief yet consequential time as ruler of the Mongol Empire. Töregene had fought ruthlessly to secure the imperial throne for her son, Guyuk, and in doing so had left the Mongol Empire's administration weakened and fractured. Her political rise came at the expense of the central government's stability. To buy the loyalty of key figures and secure Guyuk's succession, she handed out influential positions to loyalists and purged those who resisted her rule. With the help of her close confidant, Fatima, a Shia Muslim from Central Asia, Töregene attempted to remove senior officials who opposed her, including Qinkai, the Nestorian Christian chancellor, Mahmud Yalavash, the head of the Chinese Secretariat, and his son Mas'ud Beg, who oversaw Central Asian administration. Qinkai and Mahmud Yalavash found refuge with Khotan, Töregene's own son, and a rival claimant to the throne, while Mas'ud Beg fled to Batu's court in the western steppes. Others who resisted were not so fortunate. Many were captured and executed. To finance the bribes and lavish gifts needed to secure Guyuk's nomination, Töregene turned to predatory taxation. She appointed Abd al-Rahman as the head of the Chinese Secretariat, a figure notorious for his exploitative tax farming. As discussed in previous episodes, Abd al-Rahman had driven much of Mongol-occupied North China into crippling debt, and his return to power under Töregene only deepened economic hardships. Through such appointments and political favours, Töregene's campaign destabilised the empire's bureaucracy and further eroded central authority. Meanwhile, Batu, ruling over the western steppes of modern-day Russia and Kazakhstan, emerged as a powerful, independent figure beyond Töregene's reach. With the death of Chagatai in 1242, Batu became the senior-most prince of the Genghisid lineage, or Ögedei, further solidifying his influence. The cracks in Mongol unity were beginning to show. When Guyuk ascended to the throne in 1246, his top priority was reversing the damage done by his mother's regency. Just before his formal enthronement, Guyuk reconciled with his brother Khotan, who lay gravely ill. Khotan blamed Fatima for his sickness, accusing her of witchcraft and of being the root cause of the empire's recent turmoil. Whether Khotan truly believed this or simply saw her as a political scapegoat is unclear, but Guyuk promised to avenge him. Khotan died shortly after, but his sheltering of Chinkai and Mahmud Yalavash allowed these experienced statesmen to return to government under Guyuk's protection. Their reappointment marked a renewed drive towards centralisation. Guyuk wasted no time dismantling his mother's political network. Within months of his election, Töregene fell ill and died, though not before witnessing the undoing of her years of scheming. Abd al-Rahman, the deeply unpopular tax collector, was arrested and executed. All offices, privileges and decrees granted during Töregene's regency, known as Yarlis, were revoked. The most decisive blow fell upon Fatima. Chroniclers portray Töregene and Fatima as extremely close. Some even speculate their relationship may have been romantic, though this remains unproven. When Guyuk's envoys demanded that Töregene surrender Fatima, she refused. Guyuk responded by sending armed guards to ensure Fatima's capture. Fatima was taken into custody, humiliated and subjected to torture. Under duress, she confessed to witchcraft, a capital crime under Mongol law. Her family and supporters were executed, and Fatima herself met a gruesome fate. Her orifices were sewn shut, her body wrapped in felt, and she was thrown still alive into a river, a brutal punishment reserved for the most severe crimes. Töregene, devastated by these events, died shortly thereafter. Conveniently, Fatima was posthumously blamed for the mismanagement and corruption of the previous years, sparing Guyuk the need to publicly condemn his own mother. The Purges during Guyuk Khan's reign did not end with the downfall of his mother's political allies. As we discussed in the previous episode, Temujin Ochigen, the youngest brother of Genghis Khan and his only surviving full brother, had made a bid for power during Töregene's regency. Though he abandoned the attempt, the matter was not forgotten. After Guyuk's ascension, an official investigation into Temujin's actions was launched, overseen by Orda, Batu's elder brother, and Mongke, the eldest son of Toluid, and a senior figure within the Mongol hierarchy. The investigation found Temujin guilty of treason, and he was executed. Details surrounding the trial and execution remain scarce, suggesting deliberate suppression of information. The retribution extended further within the imperial family. Al-Altan, Genghis Khan's favoured daughter and wife to the Uyghur king, was also targeted. At Ögedei's final feast, Al-Altan had been present and engaged in a heated argument with her brother over growing Mongol encroachment on Uyghur territory. By the next morning, Ögedei was dead. While accusations of poisoning surfaced almost immediately, they were politically charged and lacked clear evidence. Nevertheless, under Guyuk's orders, Al-Altan was arrested, tried and executed by Guyuk's trusted commander, Ögedei. Guyuk's interventions extended beyond internal politics. Following Chagatai's death in 1242, his grandson Kara Hulegu succeeded him as head of the Chagatai Khanate, but Guyuk swiftly removed him, replacing him with his ally and drinking companion, Yezu Monke, ensuring a loyal figure governed the strategically important Chagatai territories. Guyuk's influence also reached into Anatolia. After the Mongol victory at Kosadag in 1243, the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum became a Mongol vassal, A dispute arose over succession following the death of Sultan Kaikhosro II. His sons, Kilich Arslan IV and Kaykaus II, both vied for power. Kilich Arslan travelled to Mongolia to attend Guyuk's coronation, where Guyuk formally recognised him as the new Seljuk Sultan, reinforcing Mongol authority in the region. A similar succession crisis played out in Georgia after the death of Queen Rusudan. Batu favoured Rusudan's son, David, while Baiju, the Mongol commander stationed in the Caucasus, supported Rusudan's nephew, also named David. Guyuk's solution was characteristically pragmatic. He divided the kingdom of Georgia between the two claimants, maintaining Mongol oversight while preventing either side from consolidating independent power. Militarily, Guyuk was determined to resume Mongol expansion, which had largely stalled during Turagin's regency. The ageing but legendary General Subutai was sent on his final campaign, alongside Chagan Noyan, against the Song dynasty in China. Though this campaign was brief and inconclusive, it demonstrated Guyuk's intention to maintain pressure on the Song. In the west, Ögedei was dispatched with a large force to the Middle East, accompanied by threatening letters sent to the Caliph in Baghdad, demanding submission to Mongol rule. Perhaps most ambitiously, Guyuk envisioned completing the Mongol conquest of Europe, a massive pincer movement designed to bring the remaining independent powers of the Western continent under Mongol control. John of Plano Carpini, the papal envoy, was sent back to Europe with a demand for submission, directed at the Pope and other European rulers. Confident in his plans, Guyuk set out with his army in the autumn of 1247 to lead this grand campaign. Guyuk Khan's westward military expedition in 1248 had more than one objective. While his stated ambition was to continue Mongol expansion into Europe, the campaign also served a secondary, more calculated political purpose. By bringing his forces toward the western steppes, Guyuk placed himself uncomfortably close to the territory controlled by Batu, the powerful head of the Jochid lineage. Batu would be forced to either cooperate, thereby signalling his submission to the Khan, or resist, in which case Guyuk could remove him by force. It was not purely a hostile act toward the Jochids, however. Guyuk had maintained good relations with Batu's elder brother, Orda, and there is evidence to suggest he hoped to replace Batu with Orda, much as he had replaced Kara Hulegu with Yezu Munka in the Chagatai Khanate. Yet Batu was not caught unaware. He received warning from an unlikely but politically astute source, Sorkaktani Beki, widow of Tolui, and matriarch of the Toluid branch of the royal family. Anticipating danger, Batu raised an army and moved eastward to confront the threat, sending his brother Shiban ahead to gather intelligence on Guyuk's intentions. The Mongol Empire teetered on the brink of civil war. That war never came, at least not immediately, because in April 1248, before any clash could occur, Guyuk Khan died unexpectedly a week's march west of Beshbalik. The timing was, to say the least, convenient. Contemporary sources contain rumours of foul play, with speculation that Batu orchestrated Guyuk's death through his brother Shiban. But the evidence is inconclusive. Guyuk's declining health, worsened by alcoholism, a common affliction among Mongol aristocrats, likely played a role. Whatever the true cause, Batu moved swiftly to consolidate his position. He sent envoys to Guyuk's widow, Ogul Kaimish, urging her to assume the regency, supported by the experienced statesman Chinkai, until a new great Khan could be elected. Batu proposed that the forthcoming Kuriltai, the council to select the next ruler, be held at Ala Kamak, a more centrally located site conveniently near Batu's sphere of influence, likely south of Lake Balkhash. This suggestion enraged the Ögedei and Chagatai factions, who insisted that tradition dictated the Kuriltai be held in the homeland of Genghis Khan, in the Onon-Kurulan region of northeastern Mongolia. Batu's proposal, they claimed, was a blatant attempt to tilt the political scales in his favour. Yet Batu was not acting alone. Surprisingly, his call for an alternative location received support from the Toluid lineage, led by the formidable Sorkaktani Beki. To understand this alliance, one must look to the years following Tolui's death in 1232. Sorkaktani had deftly navigated the dangerous currents of Mongol politics, declining Ögedei Khan's offer to marry his son Guyuk after Tolui's death, and instead securing her family's independence and prosperity. Sorkaktani, a niece of Togrul, ruler of the Kereyit, had long cultivated commercial and diplomatic ties. Through strategic marriages, her sisters wed to both Genghis Khan and Jochi. She maintained relationships across competing branches of the family. Her influence only grew after 1236, when she secured favourable allotments of territory and wealth for her sons, Mongke, Kublai, Hulegu, and Arikbuki, names destined to play pivotal roles in the coming decades. A skilled administrator and educator, Sorkaktani oversaw her sons' upbringing, ensuring they mastered Mongolian literacy, statecraft, and leadership. Her wealth, combined with Batu's resources and shared interests, made them a formidable alliance within the fractured empire. Whether they actively plotted Guyuk's death or simply seized the opportunity his passing created, their coordination in the aftermath outmaneuvered their rivals. As preparations for the Kuriltai at Alakamak progressed, Sorkaktani Beki likely saw herself in a far stronger position than Guyuk Khan's widow and current regent, Ogul Kaimish. Little is known of Ogul Kaimish's life before she was abruptly thrust into imperial politics. Like Toragin, she originated from the Merkit tribe, having been given to Guyuk as a wife in their youth. She bore him 2 sons, Kucha and Naku, and may have been the mother of his 3 recorded daughters. Unlike Sorkaktani or Toragin, however, Ogul Kaimish lacked a cultivated network of political allies and was woefully unprepared to navigate the treacherous world of Mongol court politics. Contemporary sources portray her as disengaged from governance, more interested in the company of shamans and merchants than managing the empire. She dismissed Batu's efforts to convene the Kuriltai, seemingly convinced that one of her sons would naturally inherit the throne, and that no succession could proceed without her consent. Critically, she also appears to have neglected the crucial practice of gift-giving, the expected distribution of wealth and favours essential for securing political support. The Kuriltai at Alakamak went ahead in 1250. It saw strong attendance from the Jochid and Toluid branches of the royal family, but most Chagataid and Ögedei princes boycotted the gathering, refusing to recognise its legitimacy. Ogul Kaimish herself did not attend, and her sons Kucha and Naku made only a brief appearance before departing. They left their representative, Temur Noyan, to vote on their behalf. Nevertheless, with the attendance of Kara Hulegu, the deposed grandson of Chagatai, and Kadan, a son of Ögedei by a concubine, Batu could claim that all branches of the royal family were represented, granting the assembly the appearance of legality. In the absence of credible rivals, the only viable candidate for the throne was Mongke, the eldest son of Tolui and Sorkaktani. Mongke was a respected military leader with a distinguished record from the Great Western Campaign. His candidacy was likely orchestrated from the outset, with Batu and Sorkaktani coordinating their efforts to secure the empire's leadership for the Toluid line. In exchange for Batu's support, it is believed they reached an agreement granting Batu effective control over the western half of the empire, solidifying Jochid power. However, this succession was fiercely contested. The Ögedei faction maintained that Genghis Khan had intended the empire to remain under their line's control. Batu, Sorkaktani, and their allies countered with several arguments. They claimed that the Ögedei family's internal conflicts and purges, such as the executions of Temuge Ochigin and Al-Altan, had forfeited their right to rule. They also invoked Mongol custom, which dictated that the younger son inherited the father's estate. Tolui, being Genghis Khan's younger son, thus made his descendants the rightful heirs. That Mongke himself was not Tolui's youngest son was conveniently overlooked. In the end, generous gift-giving, bribery by another name, helped sway the remaining undecided nobles. Even Temur Noyan, representing Kucha, and Naku, ultimately cast his vote for Mongke. With the support of the Jochid and Toluid factions secured, the assembly declared Mongke the new Great Khan. It was agreed that a formal Kuriltai would be held in Mongolia itself to officially confirm his election, though the reality of power had already shifted decisively in favour of the Toluid dynasty. The decision to hold a Kuriltai without the presence of the Ögedei faction sent their ranks into disarray. They had failed to unite behind a single candidate for the throne. Kucha and Naku both coveted the title of Great Khan, while their mother, Ogul Kaimish, appeared to favour Shiramun, a grandson of Ögedei. With rival ambitions dividing them, the three factions each established their own competing courts, paralysing the central government. Qin Kai, the imperial chancellor, found himself powerless, as none of these factions recognised his authority. In a desperate bid to raise funds for a counter-Kuriltai, Ögedei Kaimish resorted to the same exploitative policies seen during her late husband Guyuk's reign. Rather than paying merchants in hard currency, she issued drafts of uncertain value. Meanwhile, both sedentary and nomadic populations faced increased levies. Most notably, the traditional tax on nomadic herds. Historically, 1 horse out of every 100 was raised tenfold to 1 in every 10 horses. Her administration's legitimacy weakened further when an embassy from King Louis IX of France delivered a ceremonial scarlet tent as a diplomatic gift. Ögedei Kaimish paraded it as proof that the French king had submitted to her authority. It did little to bolster her position. In the summer of 1251, the decisive Kuriltai was held by the Kerulan River, where Mongke, son of Toluid, was formally enthroned as Great Khan in an elaborate ceremony. Ögedei Kaimish and her son Kucha refused to attend. Nark and Shiraman did, but they arrived not in peace, but at the head of a hidden army concealed within large gers mounted on carts. Their plan was simple: use the pretext of the feast to strike at Mongke, eliminate him, and seize the throne. But fate or poor logistics intervened. A lost camel belonging to one of Mongke's Keshig, his elite guard, led a falconer into Narku and Shiraman's camp. There he offered assistance repairing a cart and discovered its concealed load of weapons and armour, an alarming sign given the peaceful context of a Kuriltai. Feigning ignorance, he departed, riding 3 days' distance in one, to warn Mongke. Though the sources claim Mongke initially dismissed the warning, this is almost certainly political theatre. Given the volatile succession environment, he must have anticipated a coup attempt. His swift deployment of his right-hand man, Mengeza, and an armed contingent to intercept the conspirators confirms his readiness. Mengeza's forces swiftly apprehended Narku, Shiramun, and their supporters, dispersing their hidden army without bloodshed. Mongke understood that consolidating his power required a more thorough purge than even Guyuk had attempted. Kucha was summoned to appear before the new Khan. Though initially reluctant, he eventually complied. Ögedei Kaimish refused outright, denouncing Mongke's envoys as traitors to the rightful Ögedei line. They returned with an armed escort, seizing her and binding her hands with rawhide. Along with Shiramun's mother, they were delivered to the camp of Sorkaktani Beki, Mongke's formidable mother. Accusations of witchcraft followed, fueled by Sorkaktani's recent illness. Under brutal interrogation with burning brands, the women confessed. Mengeza, now the empire's chief judge, presided over their trial. Ögedei Kaimish, stripped and humiliated, remained defiant, declaring, "How can another look upon a body that only an emperor has seen?" Nevertheless, she was found guilty. Her punishment mirrored that of other disgraced royals. She was wrapped in felt and thrown into the Kerulan River, though notably spared the extreme mutilation inflicted on some. The fate of her sons was comparatively lenient. Shiraman's chief commander, tortured into implicating himself alone, shielded the princes from direct charges of treason. Kucha was placed under de facto house arrest near Karakoram, while Narku and Shiraman were dispatched to fight on the Song dynasty front in China. Mongke's purges extended far beyond Ögedei Kaimish's circle. Guyuk's key allies were systematically eliminated. Ögedei, responsible for the execution of Al-Altan, was captured and sent to Batu, where accounts differ. Some claim he was boiled alive, others that his feet and head were severed. Buri, grandson of Chagatai and Guyuk's confidant, was executed by Batu. Yesu Mongke, whom Guyuk had installed over the Chagatai Khanate, was overthrown and replaced with Kara Hulegu. Guyuk's former Atabeg, Kadak, also met his end. The Uyghur edict, once favoured by the Ögedeids, was executed by his own brother at Mongke's orders. Even Qin Kai, the long-serving but now politically vulnerable chancellor, was killed, reportedly at the hands of an old rival, Danishmand Hajib, settling a long-standing grudge. The purge of the Ögedei line did not stop until their power base had been systematically dismantled and their lands seized. Only a handful of princes survived, most notably those who had aligned themselves with Mongke or were still too young to pose a threat, such as Guyuk, a figure destined to become one of Kublai Khan's most persistent enemies. The Ulus of Ögedei, once a dominant force within the empire, effectively vanished, its territories carved up and redistributed among the Jochid line, the central government, and the Toluid faction. The Chagatai Khanate managed to avoid outright destruction, but was nonetheless reshaped. Its leadership was replaced, and several prominent princes lost their lives or positions. These developments marked what historians now refer to as the Toluid Revolution, a sweeping reconfiguration of power within the Mongol Empire. The transition of authority from the descendants of Ögedei to those of Tolui, coupled with the near-total elimination of the Ögedei lineage and the de facto partition of the empire between Batu and Mongke, represented a profound shift in the empire's political landscape. To legitimize their new dominance, Mongke and his brothers commissioned official histories that cast their rule as both inevitable and justified. These narratives deliberately tarnished the legacies of key figures associated with the Ögedei regime, including Toregen Khatun, Guyuk Khan, and Ogul Kaymış. In contrast, Sorkaktani Beki, Mongke's mother, emerged from these accounts with her reputation intact, portrayed as a wise and capable matriarch who had guided her sons to rightful leadership. Sorkaktani passed away shortly after Mongke's rise to power, but unlike her predecessors, she did so in harmony with her son, having lived to see him become Great Khan. Yet Sorkaktani's political manoeuvring and her family's rise to power came at a cost. Her actions and those of the Toluid faction sowed deep divisions among the ruling branches of the empire. Old resentments between the lines of Ögedei, Chagatai, Jochi, and Tolui now hardened into permanent fractures. The unity that Genghis Khan had fought so fiercely to create was beginning to unravel. Despite these internal tensions, Mongke prepared to lead the empire into yet another ambitious period of expansion, a final great wave of conquest that would once again project Mongol power across Eurasia, even as the foundations of the empire showed signs of strain. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of the History of the Mongols. If you like the content and want to continue to support the series, you could like the video, make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, and leave a comment to let me know where in the world you are listening from. Thank you, and see you all next time.